Is it past time to impeach Merrick Garland? Is it time to flush out all of the Democratic activists out of the bureaucracy and the deep state? Here with reaction tonight, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett, and former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker is with us. All right, Professor Dershowitz, you have a brilliant legal mind. I will be shocked if you don't agree with my assessment that this case really boils down to a disagreement over the speech and opinions of Donald J. Trump. And I naively believe, Professor, that freedom of speech was foundational to our Constitution. Was I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. Not only freedom of speech, but freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances and freedom to challenge elections. In the indictment, they acknowledge that there are these freedoms, but then they claim that this is the key point, that Donald Trump actually believed that he lost the election, that everything he did was fraudulent, that he conspired with unnamed lawyers mostly to affect the election. Now, you're allowed to challenge elections. Indeed, the best way to challenge elections is to come up with a slate of alternate electives. That's what a court said in Hawaii in 1960. That's been the case throughout our history. So the government has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that subjectively Donald Trump actually believed that he lost the election and acted contrary to that belief. Now, I read the indictment very carefully. There is no smoking gun. There is no one who is credibly prepared to testify that Donald Trump said to him, I know personally I lost the election. There's a lot of evidence that people told him he lost the election, but you know Donald Trump, and you know that he's going to make up his own mind. And they're going to have a very hard time proving that. Now, it's the District of Columbia. 90-some-odd% of the jury pool will have voted against him. So they may actually get a conviction from a D.C. jury. But will it survive appellate review and review to the Supreme Court? I do not think so.
I do not think so either, and I agree with your assessment. I don't think he can get a fair trial in New York. I don't think he can get a fair trial in D.C., and I don't think he can get a fair trial in Fulton County, Professor, to be very blunt here. Well, and I think Fulton County's next. Let me get to our other guests. Greg, I'll let you weigh in next. Your thoughts on this?
This indictment strikes me as an amateurish joke. Frankly, Jack Smith, as special counsel, should be indicted for stupidity. It's that bad. But he has this disreputable habit of bringing politically driven prosecutions by contorting the law and mangling the evidence. And, you know, these 4 counts are the definition of a stretch. It's a Gumby indictment. Conspiracy to defraud the government because Trump challenged certification of electors on January 6th. Well, he's entitled to do that under the Electoral Count Act. Democrats did the same thing in 2016 and in prior elections. Nor is it a crime to claim the election was stolen, which Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi alleged 4 years earlier. And the main point is, if Donald Trump truly believed he won, even if he was wrong about it, and he used the legal process to contest the outcome as the law clearly permits, that is not election fraud. And then Smith tosses in obstruction charge, conspiracy charge. Those are redundant of the first charge, and the exact same defense applies. So, you know, this is a junk indictment, and it's politically motivated.
Matt Whitaker, you worked at the DOJ. Let's get your take on this.
Yeah, I've never seen an indictment this messy and sloppy in my life. And, you know, really at the end of the day, they're saying that it's not a matter of, it should be a matter of what Donald Trump thought or didn't think. But instead, they try to use a kind of a reasonable person test to suggest that because Director Ratcliffe, because Attorney General Barr and others had told the president that he had lost it somehow, you know, no reasonable person would believe that. But in all of this indictment, the thing that is fascinating to me is that Jack Smith admits there was fraud in this last election. He says essentially that there wasn't an outcome determinative amount of fraud, but there was enough fraud. And so this trial, if and when it goes, could have some really interesting evidence on how much fraud is in the American electoral system, and quite frankly, how much fraud are Americans willing to withstand.
Well, and we discussed a lot of issues like laws. For example, partisan observers are allowed to watch the vote count, not from 1,000 feet away. That didn't happen according to the law in some states, Professor. Then you have the issue in Pennsylvania and the issue in Wisconsin. A stinging dissent by the Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin, a 3-4 case, but basically saying that his fellow justices were not following the law. Or in Pennsylvania, the state constitution had very, very strict rules as it comes to the issue of voting by mail, and they tried to circumvent that process of amending the Constitution by merely passing legislation. These are legitimate questions, Professor, from a legal point of view.
They are, and all he has to prove is that he understood and believed, whether he was right or wrong. Now, the real question is where the trial takes place. Everybody has already said it's going to be at the District of Columbia. We know the judge, an Obama appointee. That's not certain. First motion his lawyers will make will be a change of venue to Northern Virginia, where the jury pool will be fairer. And he will
Northern
show...
Virginia is heavily Democratic also.
Well, yeah, but not nearly as much as the District of Columbia. And you could move it further. You could move it to Southern Virginia, where it's much more even. You could move it to an adjoining state. Remember, this is a federal indictment, so it doesn't have to be tried within the state or the area. You can make a motion for a change of venue. So I think his lawyers will be kept busy moving to dismiss the indictment on First Amendment grounds, moving for a change of venue. They will probably argue some form of selective prosecution. But the key point is going to be that the prosecution has to persuade the jury of Trump's subjective belief. And people who know Trump say he really believed it.
Professor, you know Donald Trump. Do you think he believed it?
I do. I think he believed it. I think
Greg,
he was wrong.
Do you know Donald Trump? Do you think he believed it?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to him about it, and, you know, he truly believes it. I disagree. I think he lost. I'm on record saying I thought he lost, but he has a right to his own opinion. And if he pursues legal recourse by challenging the electors, then he's entitled to do that. That's not a crime.
Matt, do you believe he believed it? You know him as well.
I do. I've spent a lot of time, and I've talked to him about these issues, and I think he did seriously and honestly believe that the election was unfair, and that if an honest count had been made, that he would have won.
I think he passed a lie detector test. All right, net result here. I agree with Professor Dershowitz. I believe he can't get a fair trial in D.C. If the trial's in D.C., it's a fait accompli. It'll be a guilty verdict. What happens on appeal? Does he win? Gregg Jarrett, real quick, exit question.
Yeah, he absolutely 100% wins on appeal, either the Circuit Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. All
right. And Matt, do you think he wins?
I do, because ultimately this deprivation of rights is about taking away an individual's right. And the way it's pled, I don't see any individual that his right has been taken away.
All right, Professor, we'll give you that last sentence. I cut you off. Go ahead.
I think he may lose in the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, but I think he will probably win in the United States Supreme Court if they grant review, and they should grant review. When you have the president of the United States' people going after his opponent in a political election, it has to be beyond reproach. It has to be without any problem. It has to be the strongest case in history. This doesn't meet that standard.
Well said, all of you. Great analysis. Thank you all. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.